EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Welcome to EM Weekly, and I'm your host, Todd DeVoe speaking, and we have, of course, our wonderful co-host, Dan Scott. Dan, good morning. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. So today I'm excited to bring on our guest, and you guys, if you are on Facebook or on, I should say, on LinkedIn at all, and you're in emergency management, you have to see Lorraine Schneider running around. And Lorraine is a certified emergency manager with experience in both public and private sector, and her work focuses on community engagement and building resilience through training, exercise, and outreach. And so in 2020, she launched the Emergency Management Growth Initiative with the mission to make emergency management professionals more visible and accessible. And the three initiatives are currently highlighted as the Emergency Talk Dinner series, which I am really bummed out because I was invited to go to one and this didn't work out for me. I really want to go to it, and I can't wait till those become live again because I think that's the great informal way of discussion emergency management. The COVID-19 Hero podcast, which is actually really well done, so go out and check that out as well, and we'll have the links below as well. The Education Tour, a national series of talks led by emergency management practitioners to share our passion to help recruit the next generation of leaders. And, you know, Lorraine shares that same passion that Dan and I do of bringing up the next generation behind us because, you know, like I said, we're not aging out, right? What we're doing is we're going to be able to give our wisdom that we've learned through those years of hard work to the next generation coming us behind us. So Lorraine, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
You're busy.
I am, very much so these days. But I like to stay busy. If I'm not busy, I kind of get stir crazy. So I like keeping a full plate.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So there's a question I used to ask everybody, and I kind of went away from it, and I want to get back to it. So I'm going to ask you, this is going to be the first time I've asked this question in a long time. How did you get into emergency management?
That's a great question. And that's actually a question that I love asking all the emergency managers that I meet. So I always had the intention of getting into the security space. And I grew up in Europe, went to university in Germany, and then came over to UCLA for my study abroad year. Once that was completed, I saw that UCLA Extension was offering a certificate degree in emergency management and homeland security. So I thought, ooh, homeland security, anti-terrorism, that's totally what I want to do. And I attended my first class and I came home crying that night because I was introduced with a 3-hour lecture on the science behind earthquakes. And at that point, I had only lived in Los Angeles for a year. I had never spent any time thinking about earthquakes, really. It's not something you spend a lot of time thinking about growing up in Western Europe or any other really major disaster. So it was an initial shock. I had never heard of emergency management, but in just a couple of weeks, I totally fell in love with the program and what I was learning. And while I was doing the certificate program, I started an internship with LA City's emergency management department. And that was the beginning of a wonderful ride.
And it's a benefit to us. I mean, we say we're training the next generation coming. I think you're leading the way as far as the next generation of emergency managers. So what is it? So the Emergency Management Growth Initiative. Let's talk about that. What is it, and what prompted you with this creation?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I, having worked in emergency management over the last 4 years, I've just been observing here and there, what are the big issues that we face as a profession? What are some of our biggest hurdles that we all face, no matter if we work in the public sector, in the private sector, higher education? We all seem to have the same common problems. And so how do we address them? And so I wanted to bring people together. I wanted to expand my network and bring folks together. And so one of the first initiatives coming out of the Emergency Management Growth Initiative, which has the goal of making the emergency management profession more visible and accessible, was to host a dinner with some of the people that I know who live here in Los Angeles and bring them together to discuss a topic. And that went great. It was very well received. And then COVID-19 hit. And so I decided to move those into a virtual platform, which has been even better because it has allowed for us to meet people from all over the country, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, lots of participants. And that has really given the conversations an even higher level of connecting those groups. And then there's other initiatives going on. One that we're currently working on is a series, again, because of the need to do things virtually. We've had to adapt from the initial ideas, but we are planning a series of education talks that are meant to go to people who have either never heard of emergency management or who have barely heard of emergency management. So reaching out to colleges and universities across the country where we have like students in public administration and public health and engineering, et cetera, and presenting emergency management as a career option to them. Because leading back to your question from before, Todd, what I've realized asking the same question to a lot of emergency managers is that we all somehow fell into it. It's not like you grow up thinking that you're going to become an emergency manager, because we operate behind closed doors. Nobody sees you being an emergency manager. We're not like firefighters, police officers, EMS out in the streets. And so that's the thing. We need to better market ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, like, being that, not even just to bring up the next generation when we talk about marketing ourselves, it's telling, the public what we do. It's telling even like first responders and other people in government what we do, because there are times when they're like, I don't know exactly what an emergency manager is. And because of that, when we start looking at budget cuts, there's times when the emergency manager is an easy cut because, as one person told me one time, it's less friction to cut the emergency manager than any other position. So I think that's important. And I think what you're doing is really key to making our profession better. Outside of that, let's kind of get into that. What are some of the challenges that you see facing emergency managers today in the idea of spreading the word?
Sorry, repeat that question.
What are some of the challenges that you see today for us as emergency management to spread the word of what we do?
I think we are very comfortable amongst ourselves, reaching out, like connecting with others. I see it on LinkedIn every day. We are a pretty tight-knit group, which is really wonderful. But where we're lacking is to really reach out to those who we don't work with on a regular basis and who, again, don't know that we exist and that we are here. So reaching out to those individuals, introducing emergency management, and there are so many opportunities to do it because our work is relevant and applies to so many different areas of work, because we have to work together on so many things. Like climate change is a great example that we need to work more with people who are doing work in that area.
So to follow up on that question is, I've seen emergency manager positions all over the board, right? And mostly you're seeing them in police and fire departments, where they sit as their daily job. But I've seen them in public works, even in HR, which makes sense because HR does risk management, and so they put the emergency manager over there. Where do you think the emergency manager should report to? I'll tell you my personal opinion. I think it should report directly to the highest executive, whether it's the mayor or the city manager. So basically being at the same level as the police or fire chief. What is your opinion on that?
I actually wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it should be a standalone. Oftentimes the issue that we have when we report to a different organization or leadership group that has a different specialty, be it fire, be it police, be it security, they themselves oftentimes don't have the knowledge of the full, complete knowledge of emergency management that they should have in order to advocate for us and for our programs. It's really hard when you are reporting to someone who just lacks that knowledge, and then is not able to get you the funding, the support that you need in order to create those programs, especially when a lot of what we do, preparedness initiatives, et cetera, it's kind of hard to put a dollar amount on it. And so, yeah, and we're not driving in profits for any organization. So that's a big challenge as well.
And so to kind of expand on that answer, but also the subject. So in my 15 years of doing this, I've seen that, been so many removed that you can never get anything done because it never gets past the level that it needs to get past because someone doesn't feel it's important enough or have an understanding of why it should be done. And one of the great things about your initiative, EMGI, is that it's trying to get it out there to the new and maybe even an aspiring emergency manager, or to create that person, that willingness to be aspired to be an emergency manager. But how do we change that mindset? Right now, with we work with police, and we work with fire, and we work with EMS, and we work with all these people, and EM in general can be a position that's in one of those organizations. But how do we as professionals advertise ourselves better, publicize ourselves better, market, as we just said, market ourselves better, to kind of make them understand and elevate ourselves to the level in which we need to be, in your opinion?
So I'm a really big fan of storytelling. I guess that goes for, working for the Walt Disney Company. It's part of it. But even before then, I was really introduced to the power of storytelling. And Gabrielle Alman, who's a dear friend of mine and a mentor, and she really specializes in that. So I've learned a lot from her. But I think if we really bring out more stories of emergency managers, who they are, what their work is, but also how their work affects people all over, I think that can be really powerful. And hearing those stories can really, touch people's hearts. It can make them understand in a way that when we watch a documentary or we watch a movie, we're touched and we start showing interest in something. And one of my personal dream projects would be to actually develop a documentary or a documentary series to highlight some of those emergency managers and really bring it out. Earlier this year, I think right before the pandemic hit, Netflix came out with a show called Pandemic, I believe. And yes. And I watched it and I thought it was so wonderful, because I was seeing these individuals and what they're doing every day. And I remember, I can't recall her name right now, but this woman who, young, working in New York and leading the public health response in New York. And I was so in awe of her, and, also having a family, but also being this power woman, and seeing how much importance her job had. And so I think that really goes a long way.
Yeah, we actually had Gabby. We had Gabby on the show, and she's an amazing person, by the way. So that being said, storytelling is very important. And, you have Mr. McKinney here, who wrote a great book doing lessons from emergency management, but told in a storytelling way. And I love that. That was our Kelly gave us books last year for a giveaway. And I think it's one of those things that I think is important that we miss sometimes, is telling those stories, especially when we're up in front of a crowd, right? Of people that need to know what we do, and telling the stories is very important. I have Karina says, yes, I love storytelling. And then Eric Smith says, kind of going back with this one's very true. It should be standalone, talking about what we're talking about before. And we see a good mix here in Northern Nevada. And I think going back to that storytelling, and how do we get our administration to understand what we do as well? How do you see us getting in front of the decision makers, such as, either your elected officials and or your administrative staff for cities?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because it's also something I would like to devote a particular initiative to through the Emergency Management Growth Initiative, to work with our elected officials. I don't have the perfect answer to it yet, but I think if we were to bring those elected officials together, maybe in a capacity of having a conference of some sort for them to actually meet emergency managers, and we could have various representations from small city to state to what have you, and discuss what it is that we do and walk through different EOCs, and really expose them to our profession. That would be key. I know that here in LA City, we have a person who serves as the interface between the mayor's office and the emergency management department, and that's quite a unique position. Marilande has it, and we were talking about it the other day. We were wondering how many other cities across the U.S. have that person who is directly embedded in the mayor's office and can really be there at the mayor's ear and whisper all the good things that he or she needs to hear. So there definitely needs to be more, and we need also to do more legislative work. I think so much could be addressed in the way our laws are composed, and so if we did some more lobbying or had the right, we're connecting with the right people who would help us do that, that would also go a long way and help mitigate a lot of the issues that we face over and over again, whether it's in California, where the wildfires are, or on the Gulf Coast with a hurricane. So much could be addressed. So yeah, definitely lots to do with elected officials.
So Laura Hernandez, who was an emergency manager, but she's always an emergency manager, is now an elected official as well. And she says that every jurisdiction has a disaster council, but rarely do we utilize it to leverage to access elected officials' decision makers. You're absolutely right, Laura. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to get a little bit more into leveraging our elected officials and legislation into making emergency management better. Are you looking for that bag to help you keep organized as you travel around? Something you could carry with you every day? Well, VanQuest was founded with a simple mission: build the toughest bags and packs for you to carry every day and to help you stay organized and prepared. VanQuest has been making the ultra-durable bags and packs since 2011, and their bags and packs are trusted by the clients such as the FBI, U.S. Secret Service, and U.S. SOCOM. Yes, that is the U.S. Special Operations Command. Their bags and packs offer the best organization for the user-friendly experience, such as the high-visibility interior for the users. And I'm telling you something, I love that orange inside the bag because I could find the things I need quickly. I love my VanQuest bag. Don't forget, they offer free shipping, 100-day return guarantee, and a lifetime warranty. And if you put in EM Weekly, all caps, all one word, you get 10% off your total purchase. VanQuest.com.
Seconds count during an emergency. That's why at Titan HST, we're always inventing new technology to help people stay safe and help people who can provide help get connected with people who need help. At Titan HST, we've deployed mesh networking, allowing emergency communication even when networks are down, augmented reality, and real-time translation. We believe in the power of people to help each other stay safe and thrive.
The Outer Limits Supply Company was founded on the idea of providing high-quality first aid kits. Their goal is to supply the life-saving equipment you'll need to mitigate the majority of medical or traumatic injuries often seen during austere conditions. Whether it is when you are on the outdoor adventure or your team has responded to a major crisis, the Outer Limits Supply Company provides practical, user-friendly first aid and trauma kits that anyone can use. If you enter EM Weekly at checkout, you'll receive 20% off your purchase. So go to www.outerlimitsupply.com today. Hey, welcome back from that quick break, and thank you so much for listening to our sponsors, because without them, we could not bring you the quality programming that we bring. So before we went on the break, we're talking a little bit about, really leveraging legislation, or at least our government officials, to help make emergency management, I hate to say more professional, because we're professional. I think it's just moving into that next step of recognition of what the profession really is. Now, Laura Hernandez, again, she goes in and says, League of California Cities is a good place to start. Now, I agree with that. And also other organizations throughout the nation, each state and counties have organizations that do government legislation and government affairs. And one of the things I noticed too, though, about emergency managers and our organizations, such as, well, I'm not picking an IAEM, but that's one most people know about. IAEM is a little bit different, but a lot of those organizations are, I don't want to say afraid, but are reluctant to get into, and I'm going to put in air quotes, everybody who's listening, so everybody can see me, the lobbying aspects of things. But I think it's something that we have to do. Why do you think emergency managers are afraid to lobby? I mean, the police departments aren't, the fire departments aren't, EMS is not afraid to lobby. They'll go in and knock on doors. Why are we so reluctant as emergency management organizations to do that?
I think it's because we're a relatively young profession. We have some structural issues that we're still trying to come up with, right? How do you, this conversation always comes up, are we a profession? How can we standardize the profession? And these other professions, they've had unions for decades and decades, and so they have that structure. And we're so new that we really need to build it. That would be my guess, but I'm not an expert. So Daniel, maybe you have a better idea, but that's one of the things that I see is it's not an area that we have spent much time dedicating to. And so that's something we need to work on, and especially if we report to organizations like police, like fire, that also shows that we are kind of lacking that structure as well.
I think it's, with me, I think it's upon us. We're the ones working in the profession, and we're not doing enough as individuals, as emergency managers, to promote what it is we do, why it's important, and how we can function better. In a lot of times, and even with myself, it can seem like self-promoting. I need to be at the seat at the table. I need to be equal to the police chief and the fire chief. It's one of those things that it seems like it's self-promoting, even though it is in a way, but it's beneficial to the organizations, the communities, the jurisdictions in which we represent. But it's upon us. But a lot of it is because we're restricted. There's usually one of us. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we have a small team. Small fire departments, police departments, EMS, there's hundreds and thousands of them. They're in the public eye every day. People call them for help every day. So it's harder for us because we're kind of in the back room, because that's where a lot of our work is done. And I think a lot of it, though, is changing the way we do our work. Someone made a comment once that, well, you're in an office a lot. Well, not if you're doing the job correctly. If you're engaging the community, you're reaching out to people, you're networking, you're relationship building, you're getting partnerships together. You need to be forward facing, and you need to be out there. And I think that's the way we change our profession. That's the way we change the visibility of what it is that we do, is we got to get out front of what we do every day versus writing plans and doing training in the background. We need to come to the forefront, and we need to show people what it is, what we do, how it's important, and how they can help build it to what we do. I mean, I've worked with people and I brought them in because they needed to help me with something, law enforcement or from fire, and they're like, this is what you do, this is awesome, how do I learn more? A lot of people just don't really understand what it is we do and how we do it and why it's important. And as soon as you open that door, they want more. They want to hear more. They want to get involved. And that's what we need to do more of.
Yeah. And to add to that, I definitely think it links back to the idea of visibility. And if people don't know that you exist, then why would they ever care for you? And and that's a big piece that you mentioned of, we have to be out there in the community. And when I was working at UCLA as their training specialist, I loved that job because every day I would be out in the UCLA community training, and I would also be kind of the interface, the person that our staff would see, our students would see. and could also ask questions about why did UCLA respond in this certain way for this certain disaster. And it's really that trust building and that relationship building. And yeah, so many people didn't even know that we were an organization. They received our Bruin alerts on their phone when something was going on, but they had no idea who the people were behind it and what all else goes into that.
Absolutely. Irene makes a good point about emergency managers being legislatures and running for office, because you're right. I mean, they would make great legislatures and understanding the consideration of residents and being realistic about the budget constraints. That is a good point. And then I don't have a name here, but somebody just wrote, although emergency managers need to be better engaged in operational and business needs to create better interoperability. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. That's a relationship between emergency management and businesses. And I think that's another place where EM can do a great service in the community, especially those that are working within local jurisdictions, where you have those relationships with businesses, with the Chamber of Commerce's, go out and engage and speak to people. The other thing too, I think with emergency managers where we could do a better job is learning to do public speaking. A lot of emergency managers still don't want to step up in front of the crowd and talk, but you need to be able to step up in front and be charismatic and speak to the crowd and teach those classes and, go to the Chamber of Commerce's, to your Lions clubs, to your Rotary clubs, your Kiwanis clubs, and be out in front and have them know who you are. And I think that's the other step of making us more visible in the community as well. What do you think of that, Lorraine?
I agree. And it's funny, a lot of what we're saying right now, actually next week I'll be giving an EM Vision talk at the IEM conference. And my whole talk is about popularizing the field of emergency management and all the ways to do it. All the output we have to do, and public speaking is one that I mention. And again, leading back to what I said initially, to not just do public speaking in front of emergency managers, but in front of other groups as well.
Absolutely. Mark Vogel says, need to stress our elected officials that the public that emergency management is not just there for disaster response. And I think that's the other thing where we fail. And we're going to push this back to Dan here in a second, because Dan and I have had conversations about this before. We do lights and sirens very well. Brock Long talked about the idea of pulling emergency management out of the lights and sirens, because that's just very one aspect of what we do. But then once you have somebody who is a collateral duty emergency manager who works for, say, the fire department or the police department, and once the response is over, they get lost in how to really recover funds, how to prepare the community, all those other aspects, the resiliency aspect of it, the mitigation aspect of it. Those other areas where we lack as the profession, not as professionals, but as a whole total, where we tend to not do as well. Is that because we have so many collateral duty emergency managers, or is it because it's not, and I always use the term, it's not the sexy, quote unquote?
Yeah, it's definitely not the sexy part, I think, or people don't consider it the sexy part. Although, I think a lot of emergency managers have their preference as to what it is, and I love leading preparedness initiatives. So it's all about getting the word out there and showing that investment. And the better you run your preparedness initiatives throughout the year, the better you maintain that engagement with the population, be it through a CERT program or the like, the better off you will be when that disaster then actually hits.
And I agree with that as well. But I think ultimately too, there's so much in the response industry right now, and that is that's where we spend the most money. That's where we see the most effect, is in the respond. We see something bad happen, we respond to it. It hits the news. The news isn't covering everything the exciting thing of mitigation, the exciting thing we prevented today. It's this is happening now. And this is the response we're giving to it. This is the money, and this is how the recovery's going. But there needs to be more of that, because there is a lot of collateral duty. And it's upon those individuals that are on collateral duty to really understand what they're doing. And as I said, that's one of the issues that I have, is that I've said it many times, is those individuals that are given that collateral duty who don't take it seriously, who don't understand how big of a collateral duty that it really is and how important it is. They understand the job. And then there are those that they are thrown into that job. But it's a rotational position. So just as they become to learn the job
Right.
and get good at it, they rotate out. And the new person comes in, has no idea what they're doing, and they have to do it again. And as soon as they get good at it and really understand it, they rotate out. And it needs to, where there has to be somebody pushing those initiatives. And who's better to do that than emergency managers, real emergency managers who know what they're doing? Because we really are the link that holds them all together. They don't. If you understand, most emergency responders, they don't talk to each other. They don't want to talk to each other. They're not. When they're out on the scene, there's who's top dog. But when an emergency manager comes on the scene, they know how to talk with each people. They know how to interact them. They know how to give them the direction, the guidance, the coordination, the support that they need. Who better to link those people together and give them understanding than an emergency manager?
Absolutely. Ray Chung says, ultimately, we are salespeople trying to sell a vision of more prepared future. Our success or failure will depend on our skills at selling a product that is scary, expensive, and will only be noticed if it fails. And at the end of the day, it's almost like an insurance policy, right? I mean, no one really wants to pay for the insurance policy, but when you have that earthquake or that accident or whatever, it's key to have. And then before I ask my next question, I want to get it. Eileen says, get on local TV news with regular segment, not just doing the gray skies. Yeah, not just during the gray skies. Absolutely. I teach in my class, part of it is media relations, and having that great relationship that you can have with the media. It doesn't have to be advantageous, and getting in front of them on blue sky days, getting them to your preparedness expos, or becoming that expert and being invited to talk about these things, especially during like National Preparedness Month and other Tsunami Awareness Month coming up in March is a good time for everybody on the coast, to get involved in these things. So absolutely. So Lorraine, so now you are pretty media savvy, right? How do we get, in front of those TV cameras?
In front of TV cameras, that's a good question. Maybe I would ping somebody on Twitter for that, any local news stations. But another thing that I wanted to bring up is writing. Anybody can write. So in addition to public speaking, something we could be doing more of is write and publish our work. And it's so easy to do that these days. Even if you take a platform like Medium, you can sign up and you can, publish your articles, and you can share those articles with obviously your network, your LinkedIn network, but you can also, it will be out there and shared with the entire rest of the world. And if it gets picked up, you will have hundreds, if not thousands of readers and people you would have not reached before. And then, of course, you can also try to write and, connect with local newspapers and such to try to sell your stories. But even if you can't get that far, you still have a way of sharing what it is you think is important with the world. And if you're a good storyteller, if you make it compelling, you just will touch a lot of people's hearts.
So we're getting close to the end, but this is a good point, and Eileen brings this up. It's just, how do you deal with community that has EM position that's actually half-time with a fire department position is usually given to someone a few years away from retirement? And I'm going to add to that, emergency management positions have been known to be a retirement job. You do 25 years or 30 years at the fire department or police department, you get done with that job, and then you go and you apply to be an emergency manager somewhere. And we had a gentleman, great guy, excellent fire chief. I know him personally. I'm not going to out him right now, who took a part-time position with a local jurisdiction after he became a fire chief with emergency management. And he stated out loud in a public meeting that he did not understand all the details that went into emergency management and had to relearn a position. And he left that position. He's no longer there. But that being said, that was a fire chief, an accomplished fire chief that, everybody would think would be able to fit into that position well and had to learn so much more. What are we going to do to stop these jobs from being considered a retirement job? I can't say we stop them. Police One magazine put an article out one time that says, take some IS classes online from FEMA and you too could be an emergency manager. It's like, what do we do to move that window over to where you're going, hey, when you retire as an emergency manager, you never hear anybody go, oh, what are you going to do after retire? And say, well, I'm going to go be a fire chief, or I'm going to go be a police chief, right? but fire chiefs and police chiefs are very confident that they can go and do emergency management. How do we really sell the fact that the skills are completely different?
I think it falls back to what we discussed. If we do the things that we've just discussed of interacting more with our elected officials, help them understand what the position truly entails, what it is that we do. That's one piece. If we remove emergency management from the fire department, that is another piece. If we do more of these structural changes, then this problem will get eliminated by itself, because it is a you have to learn it now. I mean, you have more and more programs now to study it. We're really moving away from just having retired firefighters, police officers jump into this. We have a lot of young people who are now coming into this profession really eager to get started, and this would be the ideal situation for them to start. So we need to be better able to promote that.
Absolutely. And they're so talented. You know, I love talking to the colleges. I've been invited to speak to various different groups across the country, and I love talking to them and asking them questions and being with the young people that are coming into the profession, because they're so talented, intelligent, and eager. It's so great. I'm going to ask one last question, and we're going to end it with this. So Patrick Dolson comes on and says, do you think that the events of this year will help boost the EM profession by bringing more awareness to what we do? And will it help us sell, quote unquote, emergency management?
I think that, yes, it has helped us. It has helped us be in front of elected officials, for example. A lot of elected officials have had to work with their emergency managers, maybe some even for the first time. Smaller local places may have seen the need for emergency managers for the first time. But just like after every tragedy, time will pass, and so will the interest level associated with increased funding, job opportunities, etc. So it is key that we build on this, that we don't just think, oh, we had a global pandemic, everybody was made aware of how badly a disaster can turn out. We really have to build on that. And by continuing to engage and not let people forget, because we see that with all kinds of emergencies. We see that with active shooter incidents, where an active shooter incident happens. Suddenly we see we have an increase in demand for active shooter training, etc. And then time passes and it falls back down. Same thing with earthquake trainings, etc. So we really need to build off of that, and we can't just sit back and say, okay, COVID-19 happened and now it's going to help us. This is the time for us to really jump into action and share the stories and share how we helped manage this pandemic.
I think it boils down to consistency. We need to be consistent in our efforts, because there's so many differences across the as we've said, in the positions itself, there's differences in how we do things, but we need to be consistent in how we do things, but also our day-to-day and how we plan for, train for, mitigate, prevent, all the mission areas of emergency management. We need to be more consistent in that. I mean, we're in a very we're in a good place right now to really show why it's important that we do what we do, and why it's important to have people doing what we do. But one of the issues is another thing. We are in the middle, and we have to hit the top and the bottom. We have to let the masses know, but we also have to let the decision makers know why it's important. So you're kind of having to influence both ways. You're leading down, you're leading up, and you're leading side to side. So ultimately, it's up to us to be consistent in our day-to-day, to let people know why it's important of what we do. But we have to influence all those around us, because once we influence them and we let them, they're our voice too. They're talking, and they're letting people, did you know this? Did you know that? Did you understand this? I mean, did you know Dan did that? And once you get that understanding from people, they start being your voice too, and then it starts to spread. I've made this analogy before, but we would love emergency management and the importance of emergency management to spread like this pandemic did. With the word of it, did you understand why it's important that we do emergency management, and for that, the importance of it, and for the establishment of our profession and the people doing it to just grow like that, and just go again. That's it. We are in the public eye, and we can become very quickly in the public eye, but you have to let people understand why it is that it's important and what it is exactly that we do to work in our jurisdictions.
And I would add to that too that, and it's too early to say because, like you said, we're still in the midst of it. But for us to not have false confidence that, oh, this organization, we survived COVID-19, so now we can survive anything. Or also that fatigue, because this has been going on for such a long period of time. And now, as we're trying to engage with some of the business segments of, and they're just tired because they have been so involved in the COVID-19 response. And so now we can't get to all these other aspects of preparedness and resilience that we need to, that are part of our planning process.
Absolutely. And, Joe Browning says, nothing wrong with recruiting younger people in the field, but there's a lot to gain from the past experience with those with the proper background. And Joe, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The background and experience is important as well. But as long as those people that have that background and experience, and if they want to be emergency managers, go and get the proper training, and not just thinking that. And I came from lights and sirens, right? I came from EMS. That's where I started my career. So I'm not opposed to that. I'd be really, but it's the idea of going and getting additional training. Hey, Dan, Lorraine, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I want to bring producer Brian in. Thank you so much for doing everything on the back end and making sure all your comments are done. And everybody who joined us today to listen to what we're talking about and engaging in the conversation is really important. Everybody go out and do great work still. Stay safe during this time. And the holidays are coming up. And, be safe during the holidays. And everybody, stay safe. And as Mackenzie says, stay hydrated.